The story begins in a Dimdale animal park where the owners walk the animals. Next, Timmy rides through the park on a moped and rides across the street resenting the pets with his magic saddle on which he sits. Passing by sees neighbor Crocker sitting in a tree also with a parrot on his head. Timmy's dad is rock-trained in general, but smelling the neighbor immediately set Ego straight to him. The stone reaches the neighbor, smells him, but turns around and flies in the opposite direction, hitting Timmy himself. Timmy flies away on his moped into the clouds, but the stone returns to his father, and he realizes that it was his son's scent. Climbing straight up to the moon, he then falls straight to his room, breaking the window. The father looks at his watch in amazement, and does not understand why the moon is still visible in the sky during the day. The window is broken, and he wakes up in his room and talks to his magic fish about the fact that he is the only one without a pet. The surprised fish are furious and tell him that it's not surprising since he's a bad owner, but Timmy demands proof. Fish turns into a fairy and provides all the proof he needs on the TV screen. The first proof was that he fed his chicken an egg omelet, then he had a mouse and gave it a cat so the mouse wouldn't be bored. And worst of all, he sent his snail to bathe in a salt bath where it dissolved forever. Fairy Fish proves to him that he is irresponsible, and so he can't afford a pet, and even his parents won't allow it. When he arrives at his parents' house, he doesn't have time to ask them about the dog. His mom already forbids it and tells him that she heard what he was talking about with his weird fish. Timmy is furious and asks for his father's help, but his father says he won't help since he listens to his mom because she feeds him food. Back in his room, he complains to his fish that his parents didn't let him have a dog. But coming up with a sinister plan to get a dog, he asks his fish to conjure up lots of cats because his mom is allergic and needs a dog to disperse them. A plate in the kitchen with carrot sticks attracted Mom's attention. As soon as she tasted them, there was an explosion, and there were feral cats in her kitchen, even on her head. Her face was horribly wrinkled, and in a couple of seconds, she was bloated like a soccer ball or more. The father, who rushed in at his wife's scream, saw her and was terrified. Without thinking, quickly ran to Timmy's room. Walked into it frightened, started yelling at him and telling him they needed a dog immediately. At the same time, he got the crazy idea to duck into a barrel of buttons he had stolen at work. The father was perplexed by his idea and thus broke the floor and fell into the cellar. Timmy was happy about the plan with the cats, although his plan was a little different, not the way it turned out, but he would have a dog. The magical fairy fish with one magical swing transported with him to the magical pet store. There are pygmy elephants, a duck cat, a movie starfish, and other magical animals. Timmy wonders why he is in the magic pet store, but the fairy tells him that he is not allowed in the others. While walking through the pet store, he taps on the glass of the terrarium, even though it is forbidden to do so, thus bumping into huge shoes. He is met by a big guy who welcomes Ego into the magical pet store. The magical fairies are surprised to recognize the salesman and ask what he's doing here. As it turns out, he's just filling in for his niece. And yes, the place pays $8 an hour. Timmy approaches the salesman and demands the dog immediately. There is a loud barking sound from the cage in the store, and he runs up to it, pulls down the curtain, and sees a magical dog in front of him, who is also happy to see him. With joy, he says that this is the dog he wants. He is very nice and friendly. But the salesman doesn't recommend him because he is a dummy. Timmy thought he was telling him about the dog, but he was actually telling the dog about Timmy. When Timmy started giving commands to the dog, he did everything his new owner asked him to do. As it turned out, he even ate all the vocabulary, and now he can talk. Timmy is shocked by the talking dog. He should be mine. He began to reprimand, and thus asked the seller for this dog. But the seller said he was returned more often than one of your magic fish. Begging and falling on his knees, began to beg for the magic dog, saying that he would take care of him. The salesman, of course, did not believe him, but he was very late to the mall to sell ice cream, as they were already paying $9 an hour, and thus agreed to give the dog. After becoming the new 84th owner, the dog began to show his previous owners. The first one ran away in the middle of the night and left him alone in a dark apartment. The second one went on vacation but never came back, and the other one pretended to have gone to the other world until I left the house. The seller slowly drove them out of the store, so he has to clean up after the magic turtles, specifying that they were not magic, but their litter. Having provided all the necessary equipment for the dog, the cage was opened, and the magic dog ran to his new master to lick him from head to toe. Jumping on the dog like a spring and cheering and laughing, he was happy that now they would have fun together. Leaving the magical pet store satisfied, he is reminded of the most important flea powder. It must be applied every 4 hours after wishing good luck with the dummy, and this was said to the dog. They set off with a magical wave of their wand back to the normal world. Finding himself back in the room, the dog began to cheer and play, even thought that the tiny fairy was a toy ball. Timmy, out of curiosity, began to ask the dog what commands he knew, so he rushed outside to show what he could do. Timmy looked out the window and was surprised to see a huge structure, namely a ski jump, that stood in his backyard. The equipped dog stood at a height of 1,000 meters and was ready to perform an incredible stunt. After flying right off the edge of the globe, he magically spun around the ground and successfully landed on his cool bike like an experienced stunt rider. Everyone looked out of the window in shock at what was happening. The dog started to lick his master, and the magical fairies started to repeat and lick one of them. The same morning, I'm playing dancing with the dog. From behind the sofa, my father unobtrusively climbs out and says that he is not a floor lamp, and with surprise asks about the dog. Timmy introduces Sparky to his father, but Timmy is not at a loss to understand what is wrong with his father. The father fearfully says he is hiding from a monster that is in the kitchen sneezing and trying to cook. Hiding under the floor lamp, he orders the dog to take it. Sparky accepts the command and rushes to kick out the monster on his bike. But in doing so, he kicks out not only the cats, but also the mother herself, as he thinks it is the monster that needs to be kicked out. The father notices something strange about the dog, but he thinks it is just a circus dog that can ride a motorcycle. But Timmy says it's just an ordinary dog and commands him to bring the newspaper. Only the dog doesn't bring the newspaper, but the newspaper man himself. The happy dog with the newspaper in his teeth goes to the toilet, and his father shouts at him to stop doing crossword puzzles. The newspaper man demands money for the newspaper, but the father pretends that he is not at home and that he is only a floor lamp. It was a dark night in town. The magic fish were hanging out in the aquarium. Timmy was reading his favorite comic book, and the dog was playing with his new toy, even though it wasn't a toy. There was a rattle, and the door opened. It was Timmy's annoyed sister. He was very scared as she had a fight with her boyfriend and now wants to get even with him. She took out a chainsaw and wanted to attack Timmy, but the faithful dog started barking and attacked her sister. Biting her leg, she screamed all over the house that even the neighbors heard her screams. When she dropped the chainsaw in pain, she magically sawed a hole around it and fell into the basement where Daddy's buttons were scattered. As Timmy watched, he was glad to the point of tears that someone finally stood up for him, and he didn't get a beating from his sister. The magical fish fairies were shocked by the dog's performance and defense. Thus, they were pleased that getting a dog was a very good idea after all. After going to bed, Timmy doesn't understand why Sparky was sent back to the pet store so much, but in fact Ego was betrayed and left at the pet store because they were afraid of the magical turtle litter. The next day 8 a.m. Timmy wakes up and asks the dog how he slept, but the dog tells him that he doesn't sleep at night but does doggy things, with no sky or sunshine outside the window. Opening the window, the whole room is covered with earth. Timmy is very angry and doesn't understand what happened, but Sparky replies to him that he only buried the house under the ground and is ready to play on. Summoning his magical fairies, he asks them to immediately dig their house out of the ground before anyone notices it. The wish has been granted. Talking about everything producing, a scream is heard from the father. They immediately go downstairs and see a very horrible situation in the house. The father screams and shows what the dog did to the house during the night. He even brought a rug and covered the whole house with it, and now he won't be able to hear the monster's footsteps. Furious, Timmy asks Sparky why he did it, but he hears back that he's a dog and the carpet was discounted. Dad remarks that it's a talking dog, but Timmy proves otherwise and says he's just barking funny. In an indignant voice, his father orders him to clean the house. Meanwhile, he sets off to do the crossword puzzle himself. But screams are heard outside the door, and he realizes that Sparky has solved all the crossword puzzles and even the Sudoku. Hearing strange sounds in the street, they rush to the door. Opening it, observes a terrible picture in front of him. The city is completely in holes. And Sparky is pleased and surprised that all the people are playing with ego pits. Timmy is furious since the town is ruined, and he asks his magic fairies to put everything back. But the fairies answer him that this is not possible since he buried their magic wands, and without them they cannot conjure. Sparky was on a very big kick during the night. At one point the dog starts to itch a lot, namely, he is bitten by fleas. A new problem has come unbidden, and the fairy asks if Timmy could have forgotten to treat Sparky with flea powder, and he did forget about it. And these were not ordinary fleas, but magic fleas. If they bite a person, a terrible thing will happen. The fleas rushed through the town and saw people at the bus stop. Jumped on one of the people standing at the bus stop. Big teeth bite Ego's body. The man is puzzled. After a few seconds, the man's legs and arms turn into hairy paws, and he becomes a wolf and runs away. Standing people are also bitten, and they turn into wild dogs that chew on everything. Timmy is very frightened and realizes that this is really a horror. The mad dogs come out of the holes, and some just run in line behind Timmy. As they approach Timmy and his friends, they scream at the whole town and quickly run away as fast as they can towards the house. The vicious dogs chase them, but Timmy and his friends run with great speed through the ruined town, running through all the holes and jumping over the biggest one near the house. But the wild dogs don't notice it and fall right into it. They manage to escape from the savages. The joyful Timmy commands the dog to immediately find the magic wands, but the dog as always brings not a wand, but a fairy named Wendy, the owner of the magic wand, and a couple of minutes later a beautiful stranger. In the meantime, one of the fairies is already approaching her, but the other fairy doesn't hesitate long enough to chase her away. He takes a hose with water and flushes her away from everyone, but the fairy says that he was only addressing the lamp. The dog again sets out to find the wand, but this time he brings not the wand but Wand's neighbor. Timmy is furious. The wild dogs do manage to get out of the hole, and they again head towards the house where they see their tasty old acquaintances. Running into the house, he quickly locks the door and says that he must find the sticks and fix everything immediately. Looking at the TV, there is a news show and talks about what is happening in the city, how everything is terrible, but only the dog groomer is fine. The hatches in the city are already overflowing with hair, and the fleas have already gotten to the channel anchor and are biting him. He turns into a kind poodle after a few seconds of vinegar. The hairy sister kicks down the door holding a chainsaw. They are all scared. She comes closer and closer to them. A flea powder on a shelf, hit by a chainsaw, spills on her head, and after a magical explosion, his sister turns back into a human. At the same moment, she comes to her senses but still wants to cut Timmy to pieces. But Sparky won't let her do it, starts barking at her. She drops the chainsaw out of fright. She falls to the floor, and it cuts her in a circle, and she falls straight into the basement, but a barrel of buttons softens her fall. Timmy from above with a surprised face looks up to see if his sister's ego is okay through the hole. With a surprised face, one of the fairies asks if they saw what happened in front of their eyes, and magic happened. Flea powder was able to turn Timmy's sister back. Thinking of a plan to save the town from the dog plague, his father yells and calls Timmy to look at Ego new airplane. Timmy gets the idea immediately to saw the powder over the town with the airplane and save the town. While polishing his plane, Timmy asks where he got it from, and his father replies that he made it out of old boards from the hotel and named it the Dinkin Pollinator because he wants to dust the neighbor because he is allergic to it. After asking his father's permission, he allows him to fill the compartment with magic powder and saw over the city to save people. He fills the compartment with powder, puts on his flight gear, puts on his goggles with his dog, and takes off to save the city. Taking to the sky above the city, he presses the red button to release the magic powder. Enveloping the city, the green powder falls on the citizens of the city. As soon as the powder hits the body of the hairy animals, a popping sound is heard, and they turn back into humans in a flash and don't realize what has happened to them. After flying around the city and returning everyone to their previous state, Timmy realizes that he doesn't know how to fly the plane after all and falls into a panic. Falling down and not keeping the rudder off the plane, he crashes as his father is not a very good airplane builder. At the same moment, Sparky finds a parachute. Timmy is excited, but the dog says he has to try it out first, so he puts it on and jumps down. The parachute opens successfully, but Timmy still flies down and lands closer and closer to the ground. The airplane is already falling apart in the air, and Timmy is flying through the clouds alone, but miraculously he lands in the pool and stays alive. Climbing out of the pool, a sad Timmy says it was a big mistake to get a dog, as he is a terrible dog and should be brought back immediately. After landing on the ground, Sparky hears everything. He unzips his parachute and goes far into the woods so no one will find him. When Timmy comes home, he wonders if Sparky will be accepted back and notices the mess in the room and the dog's footprints leading to the TV. Noticing a very strange disc on the couch, they turn it on and see Sparky, who tells them that Timmy was the best owner in the world and shares memories. How they rode in the car with their heads out, eating spaghetti even though Sparky is allergic to it, and how they saved the town from the hairy plague, and how the town mayor thanked them. Sparky was very bored. A frustrated Timmy was already missing the dog and thinking about how he was just a dog and everything he did was normal for dogs, and he should bring him home after all. Outside the window, the familiar voice of a TV anchor says to turn on the news immediately. The city and its sewers were completely clogged with dog hair, and thus the water dam was on the verge of collapse, and the water would flood the entire city. But looking out the window, Timmy realized that the first house to go underwater would be his, since the dam itself was in his backyard, and he had once made that wish and many others. The dike was bursting more and more from the water, but Sparky was spotted near it and came back to sing his new song to Timmy for good measure. The dam bursts and the dog is washed away by the water and carried by the current through the town. Watching Sparky drown, Timmy rushes to save him. Finding Sparky in the water, he climbs ashore and tries to bring him to his senses. When he wakes up, he continues to play the guitar even though it's not really there. Satisfied, Timmy is happy that the dog is alive and not drowned. But in return, he hears that magical dogs do not drown, and why he ducked to save him. But Timmy was still glad to see the dog back. A news anchor toasting on a hot sausage barrel says that the town was destroyed, but the spa was saved, and Timmy is not as bad a boss as everyone thought. A current of water brings the fairies magic wands. One of them notices the wands, and they start to rejoice together. Timmy makes a wish to bring everything back, and with a magical wave everything is back. The wool disappears, the dam is restored, and the town dries up. The story ends successfully, and now all the inhabitants of the town can walk in peace.